Hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome from me, Michael Scott, and from my joint convener, Sanford J. Ungar, to the 33rd jointly promoted event between the Future of the Humanities Project and the Free Speech Project. The latter is sponsored by Georgetown University and the former by Georgetown's Humanities Initiative in association with Campion Hall, Oxford, and the Las Casas Institute for Social Justice, Blackfriars Hall, Oxford. Together, the two projects consider issues concerning human dignity, rights, cultures, histories, traditions, and freedoms in a wide spectrum of educational activity, policy, expression, and aspiration. In a moment, I'll hand over to Sandy, who's the director of the Free Speech Project. He will introduce today's distinguished guests and moderate the ensuing discussion before I return to chair the question and answer session in about 45 minutes. From the start, you can type in questions to the panel by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please use the Q&A button and not the chat button. These questions will come to me during the session, and I will try and put them into the panel to consider later on. We urge you, please, to ask questions as and when they occur to you so that there's not a bottleneck at the end. I'm looking forward greatly to today's discussion, and I hand you over to Sandy. Sandy.
Thank you very much, Mike, and welcome to everybody. We have people speaking from a variety of places. We're hoping the internet gods favor us today, and everyone has adequate Zoom coverage to reach each other. But we have people we have one in Canada, one in Los Angeles, one in Princeton, New Jersey. Mike is in Provence, and I'm in small town Pennsylvania. Jim is in Paris, so we cover a lot of ground. I'm happy to introduce our quite distinguished panel, very, very interested people who can shed light on some surprising aspects of this issue of celebrityhood. Gemma Horton is an impact fellow at the Center for Freedom of the Media based in the Department of Journalism Studies at the University of Sheffield in the United Kingdom, though she happens to be in France today. Landon Jones is an author and a magazine editor, and some might wonder whether Landon is responsible in part for the phenomenon that he studies. He was the top editor of People magazine for a number of years, and he's recently published a book called Celebrity Nation: How America Evolved into a Culture of Fans and Followers. And I dare say the same can be said of the United Kingdom as well. Lorraine Mary York is professor of English and Cultural Studies at McMaster University in Canada, where she specializes in Canadian literature and celebrity culture. And S. Mark Young, professor of accounting at the University of Southern California. It might be surprising that we're turning to a professor of accounting for some particularly interesting and astute observations about celebrityhood, but his book is called The Mirror Effect: How Celebrity Narcissism is Seducing America, a New York Times bestseller. I'd like to start with the question of, are there people who think we're naive for focusing attention on this subject now? Is it just catching our attention now, or has this been true for a very long time and just not noticed perhaps by professors and journalists and intellectuals? Lanny, I think I might turn to you first and ask you, it occurs to me one possible explanation for more focus on this these days is that both the United States and the UK, and to some extent Canada as well, have had celebrity leaders in recent years. And of course, Donald Trump changed entirely the way people looked at political news and the presidency in the United States. Lenny, be sure to take yourself off mute and let us know what you think.
Yes, I mean, to me, I date it to the introduction of social media and smartphones, around 2006. Celebrity has always been dependent upon technologies. I mean, going back, as we know, to Alexander the Great, who had put his face on a coin, but now the rapid development of social media has sort of outstripped our abilities to get our arms around it, and so suddenly fame has become divorced from achievement, and the normal sort of relationship we saw between heroes and celebrities has blurred. They used to be separate. They stayed in separate lanes. But now we don't know who's a hero, who's a celebrity, or why. And we're certainly going to see it in the coming elections next year.
Lorraine, do you have some thoughts about this? You teach about celebrityhood and all this. And you might tell us whether the picture is different, meaningfully different in Canada from the UK and the United States.
Yeah, I agree. I'll just start by saying I agree entirely with Lanny, and that there is a very, very long history of this urge to look to particular individuals as guides, or as at least of interest in terms of what they have to say. But I do think that a big moment comes with, and I'm entirely in agreement with Lanny here, with technological change. And I would place a big moment also with the development of photography, where you could circulate image, right? And so someone like Sarah Bernhardt is, I think, the first mega celebrity of the photographic age. In terms of Canada, yes, there is a celebrity system. There's a celebrity system everywhere. And some of my colleagues in my field have developed the term small nation celebrity to capture the specificity of those kinds of systems.
Mark, what is your explanation for the expansion of interest in celebrities and reliance on celebrities? And I think you have looked at the motivation for people to become celebrities, to make themselves into celebrities as well.
Yes, I mean, I think that Lenny's right, that if you go back to 2005, 2006 with the development of MySpace and YouTube, YouTube's moniker really was broadcaster self. And so what we see happening for, close to 20 years now is, the rise of people wanting to be in the limelight. I would argue that the vast majority of people who are constantly posting, who want to be in the limelight, really have a motivation that is born out of their narcissism. And narcissism is an often overused term. It's different from egotism, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But the whole idea is that roughly they estimate 6% of the population has strong narcissistic tendencies. And so I think if we were to dig a little bit deeper, we'd find that the people who are constantly seeking fame, as Lenny talked about, really have at their core the need to be heard, the need to be seen. But essentially, many people, many of the celebrities, for instance, that we have interviewed, evince a great deal of early childhood trauma. And so the link here is that if you scratch just a little bit below the surface, you'll see many people who want to seek fame having childhood trauma, which causes them to have a great deal of shame, thinking they were responsible for the trauma that they experienced as a child, which in turn leads them to want to seek attention. And what better place than to be in the entertainment industry or in politics or in professions where they can be seen and heard.
Gemma, is this consistent with your study of celebrity? I have the impression that you personally in your work, in your research, put a free speech twist on celebrity, given the institution that you're associated with. Be sure to unmute yourself before you answer.
Yeah, so I mean, predominantly, I look at freedom of expression against celebrities' right to privacy. So, for example, when celebrities are in the media telling us all about their private lives, divulging personal information, but then there might come a time when perhaps the press publish something that they don't want published out there. Then they say, I have a right to privacy over this information. The press will then sometimes come back and say, but look at everything that you've divulged before. You can't pick and choose when you have privacy. And this is very much the argument in the UK tabloid media, for example, with Harry and Meghan. We see that playing out quite a bit. It's you can't have privacy when you want. They're saying that, we can. Privacy is something that we should decide what moments constitute being private. But I also think in the UK, the rise of perhaps reality TV shows as well goes hand in hand with sort of the rise of celebrity culture. So in the UK, for example, at the moment, we have Love Island, which is one of our big reality TV shows. From there, the contestants then go to social media. They gain a large amount of following. People listen to what they say, whether that's, they're trying to sell products, product placement, that kind of thing. But one of the things with social media that I've started to look at is this idea of how authentic is it? So what kind of image are celebrities portraying? Is it that their actual authentic selves, or is it just what they want their followers to perhaps see? Is there a team behind them, the social media, that's posting for them? So I don't know if we can take everything that they post on social media, perhaps as complete truth, their complete views, for example, because we don't know that distinction between, how authentic they're being.
I'd like to, that's a very interesting point. How much of what celebrities say or act out on social media is necessarily true? And is this a domain in which misinformation, disinformation is particularly rampant? I'm not sure who wants to address that. And I'd certainly want to come back to the question of narcissism and how to distinguish it from exhibitionism. But what about the truth or falsity of what celebrities say about themselves or about political and social issues on online?
I think my understanding of this in talking to a number of publicists is that one of their jobs is to help kind of manufacture a persona, which may have some truth to it and which may not. So, when we talk about people saying, oh, I just love such and such a celebrity, I love their warmth, I love their openness. Some of that may be true, but we have to remember there's a huge machine in Hollywood that really kind of helps promote these specific images. Also, on the celebrity side, I think as Gemma notes here, celebrities have a huge influence on journalists as well. I won't tell you the name of this person, but somebody in the journalism community told me that this very, very famous female celebrity would regularly call up the media and say, I'm going to be at a particular store on Rodeo Drive with my 2 children at 2 o'clock. I'll see you there. So it's not as if celebrities are being ambushed all the time. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship that they have with the media.
Lenny.
Well, yes, that's so true. And what you think about is branding. I mean, celebrities see themselves as a brand. Now, where does that come from? It comes from marketing. And so the role of marketing and influencers and essentially paying celebrities to endorse products and endorse lifestyles and to be a brand is an important part of this conspiracy. I see it as a relationship between marketers and the media themselves, celebrities, and a very willing public. So no one is standing up against this. And there's no voice of authority that I know of that can stand up and say, well, wait a minute, that's not true. And so there's an issue in this in establishing credibility for all of us. And I watched the evening news this week, and it's all celebrities all the time. It's Madonna, it's Elton John's farewell tour, it's somebody throwing a rock at Harry Styles, and that's all they talk about. Why? Because it attracts eyeballs.
Is that how People magazine became such a huge success in its heyday?
Well, we didn't know that at first. We didn't even use the word celebrities, and we did not think it was a celebrity magazine. But what happened was that celebrities sold, and television back in those days sold. And so TV exposure was making all the difference then. And then eventually reality television, and then social media. And so each technology, as Lorraine was saying, kind of gives a shot in the arm to a new generation of celebrity.
Lorraine, you studied particular celebrities, I believe, and told their stories, wrote about their evolution. What are the insights you've gained there?
One thing that occurs to me, and I am so enjoying this conversation, is that every single scrap of information that we have about celebrities is a representation. Everything it builds to construct what the wonderful celebrity theorist Richard Dyer called a celebrity text. So even protestations of, this is what I privately feel, all of these things are mediated for us. So for that reason, I feel that in some ways it's a problematic project to try to specify, what does the celebrity really stand for? It's a system, as others of our panelists have pointed out. It's a very unstable system, and it's a kind of push me, pull you kind of system, as people have also said. It's an ecosystem in a sense. So I tend to be a little bit more interested in my own work, not so much in figuring out what is real or what is authentic, because that's a kind of game of the system, but instead, what do publics make of it? How do people work with celebrity, not only to maybe unfortunate ends, but to also really socially powerful ones?
Lorraine, you published a book 5 years ago called, if I'm not mistaken, Reluctant Celebrity. What were you getting at there?
This was a study of those individual celebrities who profess publicly to be deeply uncomfortable with their celebrity status. And I know, and the very concept does produce chuckles, doesn't it? But what I found in researching that book is that disproportionately, those celebrities who were given fairly broad acceptance for voicing that opinion or that feeling, that public feeling about celebrity, were overwhelmingly white, cisgender, male celebrities, for whom avowing a distance from celebrity was also contiguous, was also connected with disavowing a public realm that they saw as degraded and feminized. So that's what I found out.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right, Gemma, in the UK, it seems there's athletes. It's true in the United States as well. We'll get that in a moment. But some athletes, especially players of what is called football in most of the world and soccer in the United States, seem to be able to attract huge amounts of attention when they express political opinions or make social remarks.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true in the UK. So, for example, I don't know if you heard about, when footballers started taking the knee before kickoff at matches, it proved to be very controversial at some grounds, and also with some newspapers, for example. Some people applauded it, some people booed when it happened. So it did cause quite, the reaction to the public. And then also another one, I don't know if you heard of Marcus Rashford. But he was campaigning for school meals for children. These were children who were going hungry because they couldn't afford to have school meals. And he stepped forward and he had conversations with political leaders, for example, to try and find a way to make sure that children were fed at lunch. And again, that attracted a lot of attention by the press. Some who basically said, you should stick to football, stay out of political issues such as this, stay out of social issues, just do your job, when all he was trying to do was basically raise awareness. So yeah, it's a very sort of mixed reception when sports people try and take a stance on particular issues.
Well, that's a little bit surprising that he came under attack, because he was trying to do something for social good. He was trying to use his image, his reputation, his fame to promote something good, as many people feel that Colin Kaepernick, the American football player, was doing when he first took a knee some years back. Seemed like simpler times during the playing of the national anthem. But others have used it for really quite nasty purposes. Some would even say evil purposes. I think of Kanye West, now known as Ye, and his viciously anti-Semitic remarks and all the attention they got. And he clearly was using his celebrityhood. I think that he and I can't remember her first name right now, Kardashian, his wife or ex-wife, have used celebrityhood, used the social media platforms in a very selfish and some would say evil manner. Mark, what do you say about that?
Well,
I think that with Kanye West, he allegedly has bipolar disorder, and so to some extent, it's very hard to determine whether what he's saying is how he truly feels, whether he's in a manic state when he makes those kinds of statements. I'm a little bit uncomfortable talking about this because I don't know if anybody's actually clinically diagnosed him with having bipolar disorder, but certainly if you look at the highs and lows of the kinds of things he's been saying over time, it certainly points to some kind of mental illness. But on the other hand, when you talk about Kaepernick, I think back, and you mentioned this in some of your earlier notes, back to Tommy Smith, in the days when, he raised his fist after the Olympic Games. I actually was at Oberlin 4 years later as a student when Tommy Smith became the assistant athletic director under Jack Scott. It was a very, very interesting time. And Smith would always say that when he raised his fist, it was not a Black Power salute. It was a salute meant to highlight the issues of human rights in a wide variety of contexts. So he has always claimed in his recent book that he was really kind of misunderstood. Nevertheless, he and John Carlos received enormous backlash at the time for raising his fist in that manner. I think you also have to consider, the notion that there's still a lot of racism in professional sports. And I think it's something that does not come out that frequently. So when players are taking knees, it's in part, in my opinion, to not only call attention to a broad issue, but perhaps also to call attention to what's still going on inside many kinds of institutions like this.
And do they tend to, years later, you mentioned having that Tommy Smith ended up as an assistant athletic director at Oberlin. Did this pay off in a sense? Did it have a long-term positive effect, even if they were ostracized and criticized initially for this gesture at the Olympic Games? I think it was in 1968, long time ago.
Yes, it was in 68. And when Smith was at Oberlin, of course, he had attracted an enormous amount of attention and taught classes on, one was called Sports and Racism. and other things like that. But I applauded him for standing up the way he did, because someone like him who'd experienced all of these things as a black man, as a black athlete, where again, there was a lot of racism, probably more racism at the time. If he couldn't call attention to this, who was going to? So I think that he did have a huge impact.
Lanny, you were about to speak a moment ago, and I'm not sure what point you wanted to raise.
Yes. Well, I was going to add about Kanye West, that his visibility was because he was standing on a podium. And the podium was provided by Adidas, the tennis shoe manufacturer, that invested heavily in him. And now has had, because of the recent scandals, has had to kind of withdraw about $1 billion worth of tennis shoes, from the market. And so there's high risk in here for the marketers who pay the influencers to do this. And it's often very hard to sort out. And I think it leaves the public a little bit bewildered. This week in the news, for example, I saw that a man is announced to run for the Senate in Michigan. His name is Hill Harper, and he's identified in every article I've seen as an actor from the Good Doctor television show. And you have to read deeply into the article to find out what he has. Really no exact public service. He's an able guy, but he's a Harvard Law School graduate and so on. But he is presented to the public as the actor in the Good Doctor and some other show, CSI New York. And so the identification is with show business.
One of the phenomena I've read about recently in preparing for this was this notion that members of the public, and this came up a little bit earlier, believe they know celebrities quite well, perhaps from seeing them act on television, from seeing some public gesture. But it's a very one-way relationship, it seems to me. And how does it come about that members of the unsuspecting public think they know these people they're watching and following on social media, that they know a lot about them, when, as Mark said earlier, it's often a manufactured identity? Lorraine?
This is what I think of as the authenticity effect, that there is a kind of projection in various ways of an effect of authenticity, and I would see people as working with that, as yes, sometimes being taken by it wholeheartedly, but also I find that audiences are also very canny at pointing out the inconsistencies, the seams in the fabric of celebrity, and seeing for example, to just point to a very obvious example, the anti-animal cruelty celebrity who speaks out while wearing a leather jacket. That actually did happen, by the way. So I do see audiences as, yes, sometimes taken in by it, but even those public feelings, I would argue, are really important to take seriously. And otherwise, I just find audiences are perhaps better than we think at sniffing out inconsistencies in the celebrity text.
Yeah, but perhaps one of the most notorious examples of this has to do with the British royal family, where people, and not just in the UK, but people around the world, and certainly in the United States and Canada, people take sides in these disputes, and they become very engaged, and they sit up all night waiting for someone to pass by in a carriage. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but what is? Do you have an explanation for that? Is it just? Maybe feeling a closeness with royalty is its own explanation, but they're not close to the royal family at all.
No, the royal family, obviously here in the UK, we have, there's a mixture of opinion on the royal family. There are those who are staunch royalists who, you know, would queue, like you say, overnight just to catch a glimpse of them in the carriage, you know, going past. If we think about the coronation that we just had the other month, you know, the crowds that turned out for that, the people who had camped there overnight, you know, even some for over a week, just to catch a glimpse of King Charles. I think it's perhaps it's an idea of sort of tradition. In some cases, we have this grand institution where people think that, you know, because they're British, they can relate to having the royal family. I'm not entirely sure what it is about the royal family that does sort of, you know, produce this effect. I think for perhaps more traditional celebrities, the impact of social media has been really important with being able to sort of respond to fans, for example, on Twitter, on Tumblr, for example, when fans ask them questions. And perhaps that's what sort of gives them this growing sense of knowing these people and feeling like, you know, they know a bit more about them, like they're being seen by these celebrities. Whereas we don't really get that with the royal family. You know, they're on social media, they post things, but, you know, they don't respond to fans. They, you know, the royal family has a dignified silence about them. You know, they never explain, for example, they just remain silent. So I'm not really sure what it is about the royal family, but all I know is that, yes, they remain hugely popular in the United Kingdom and worldwide. And people wondered if that phenomenon might, you know, decrease once the Queen had passed away and King Charles took to the throne. But I don't necessarily think it has decreased as much as some people perhaps initially thought.
We had one of our recent forums was about the condition of democracy in the United Kingdom. We'd been doing an intermittent series on various countries, and it was a little bit of a cheeky thing to ask about British democracy and whether it's going to survive. But and by the way, more than 1,000 people, I think a very substantial number of Americans, have viewed that forum on YouTube. So clearly, Britain still, the special relationship is still there. Now, 1,000 is nothing in the millions and millions of Americans on social media, but it's a pretty substantial number of people to go to the trouble of finding one of these forums. Well, in that forum, people said, yes, there are abuses and there is something at times about the royal family that people don't like and complain about, but that there was not a scintilla of evidence that the UK would in any way move to do away with the royal family. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think we will be getting rid of the royal family anytime soon. I can't see any revolution taking place. So no, I think they will remain. I think they will remain a controversial figure for some, because of the displays of opulence. Perhaps we had Republic, for example. They protested on the day of the coronation, saying all of this money is being spent when we have people, struggling to eat, struggling to heat their homes. We're in a cost of living crisis. Is it right that we should be spending this amount of money on the royal family? But I mean, you're always going to have those, people with different opinions, I think, on the royal family. But yeah, at the moment in time, I can't see a revolution taking place in the UK.
Mark, earlier you said the estimate is that, I think you said 6% of Americans suffer from some kind of narcissism or exhibit some element of narcissism. I actually thought that seemed like a low number to me, given what we've been experiencing recently, and especially after Donald Trump's presidency. Is it growing? Is it shrinking? You can get a lot of attention by being narcissistic.
I think, the data I saw was probably about 6 years old. I haven't seen anything that is newer. One of the things that I've seen, however, is a huge increase in overall anxiety of the US population. And so what I wanted to do is kind of to loop back and talk a little bit about your previous question, which was, why do people feel like they know celebrity and want to identify with celebrities? Yeah, again, some of the data I've seen over the last few years is that there has been a significant decline in belief in political and religious institutions. There's also been, the nuclear family has also exploded. And I think many young people are really interested in trying to find a hero. They want to look up to someone. And so these three traditional institutions, because they have been, in the decline in some way, they make young people say to themselves, well, what's left? And so with the media constantly bombarding everyone, magazine covers, television shows, reality shows, as Gemma pointed out, young people are naturally going to turn to something that they can cling to. And so with these manufactured images that have been promulgated, I think there's a natural tendency to really want to identify with a person, a group, or groups. And so, we see people, especially young people today, many of whom are anxious, they're disenfranchised. The world is a difficult place to live in these days. They want to find something, a constancy, something that they can follow, something they can believe in, and something that they can identify with. And so I think that's partly an explanation for why we see people clinging to celebrities and hoping, that they have a glimpse of them. If you saw the recent press with Tom Cruise's latest Mission Impossible movie coming out, I mean, Tom Cruise just revels in meeting his fans, and his fans just absolutely adore him. They're willing to do anything to catch a glimpse, and so he's quite willing to provide what they need. And so fans around the world who aren't at those events, they see him glad-handing everyone and think to themselves, oh, what a wonderful person. I wish I was there. I'm sure he would be my friend if I had a chance to know him. And I think that's the kind of feeling that these top superstars, are trying to put out.
There's something sad about that.
Yes.
Lanny.
Well, I was just going to note that some studies have shown that the more intense a person is a celebrity worshiper, the less likely they are to be involved, to vote, to be involved in community activities. And there's a lot of documentation about that. And so the parasocial relationships, as you said, is a one-way street, but it doesn't really reward much of anybody. I'm curious, Mark, did you look into acquired situational narcissism? That is, when someone becomes famous, they become more narcissistic, even if they were a little bit that way before they got there.
Interesting that you should bring this up, because in the research we did that Drew Pinsky and I did for our book, what we found is that narcissism is a really, kind of a stable construct. It doesn't change over time. And so actually, I don't believe in the concept of acquired situational narcissism, because narcissism comes about from early childhood trauma. And so certainly, you see people gathering, believing that there's something special once they hit the limelight. But I think that those tendencies have always been there, again, because of the early childhood trauma. So I don't think that being pampered necessarily leads to increased narcissism. You may, become a little bit more unbearable, but in terms of the narcissism construct itself, I don't think that changes.
Well,
Could I push back ever so gently and
Please.
respectfully on on an element of the pathologizing of celebrity, which I do see as a fairly broad discourse. And, sometimes, as we've heard today, for some very good reasons. But I wonder if it doesn't type celebrity as always ever being a kind of empty experience, or that it is associated with a somewhat problematic take on the world. Whereas I see it as something that can have so many different ramifications, including you know, we were just talking recently about Colin Kaepernick and what his experience had to teach and continues to have to teach. I remember, for example, that although we all associate Kaepernick taking the knee, there's that iconic photograph, you know, there are iconic photographs of him taking a knee alongside some of his colleagues on the 49ers. But how the whole thing really started was that he wasn't taking a knee, he was sitting on the bench, and someone in the 49ers fan club saw that he was sitting, took a picture of him, posted it on Twitter. It went around, and at that point, Kaepernick said, "Well, I'm sitting because I won't stand for a flag of a nation that doesn't respect, that treats African American people so badly." And so, what I see in that moment is something really powerful, and it's the surveillance of African American people, this constant surveillance and loyalty test. So I guess I'm a little bit more in the tendency to think of celebrity as a system that can teach us so much about how we're operating in community with and sometimes against each other.
Well, that's a very
Lorraine,
interesting.
I completely agree with this. I mean, I guess my take on celebrity is actually a very sympathetic one, because I believe that most celebrities are really misunderstood. In fact, when you read articles about lots of celebrities, they decry how bad celebrities are. But without celebrity, I don't know where we would be as a society, because some celebrities are naturally going to rise up. And the question is, which ones are going to be influential? Which ones are going to be quote good for society? Which ones are going to be bad for society? So I think our discussion here really is about how do we evaluate what celebrities do and say? Are they doing good things? Sean Penn going to meet El Capo, okay? Is that a good thing or not? You see other celebrities like, Sophia Bush, who is, a COVID spokesperson and a Time's Up proponent, or, Alicia Keys with her, keeping a child alive. There are many celebrities who are actually doing really great things out there. But often the people who are doing the great things don't get a whole lot of press. Remember, I believe that celebrities exist because of the amount of shelf life that they have. And so there are some celebrities, a Meryl Streep doesn't need to be out there promoting anything because she's Meryl Streep and she has achieved her greatness because of talent. But I think a lot of celebrities out there, or pseudo celebrities, are always worried because many of them may not have the kind of talent or sustainability that others have. So their publicists or others will use strategies to try to keep them, in the limelight. Yeah. And so I think that we have to sit back and try to, really evaluate what they say and do.
Maybe one more comment, Lanny, before we turn to
Sure.
Mike Scott too.
Just gonna note, I couldn't resist saying of people, we used to say that a celebrity without a cause was like a woodpecker without a tree. And so it was always an important part of the resume was to have a cause. And you can look back and see the people, from someone like Elizabeth Taylor, who first started that with her activity on AIDS, but that came late in life for her. So it took her a while to get there, but they do it.
Mike, we'll turn back to you now. There's a lot of rich material here. I hope we can get to some of the questions.
Can I just start with one about what's the difference between a celebrity and an icon? If an icon represents the fears and aspirations of a community, is that what, which is Bradbrook's definition of an icon, is that what celebrities do? Do they represent the fears as well as the aspirations of a community? Lorraine.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think celebrities in general do represent all of this tumble of human perplexities, right? They allow audiences to sort through, well, really what I would call ideology and ideologies and the contradictions between ideologies and within them. The distinction between celebrity and icon, I think, is a very loaded one. I think that icon is a term that tends to be used to suggest a kind of saturation of value. And celebrity tends to be used to suggest fleeting fame. In fact, if you look at the derivation of the word celebrity, it comes from a Latin root that does mean fleeting.
So you say that, for example, that the church since medieval times in creating saints hasn't been creating celebrities?
I think you could make that argument. Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
When you can also look at the Oxford English definition of celebrity, and it gets to celebrant, and it's the link between the mortal and the divine. And there's something sort of hardwired. The priest who performs a service is the celebrant, linking the parishioners to the divine. And you do wonder if there's something hardwired in human nature that goes back to our beginnings that makes us seek this. And we found it once in the Greek gods, and now we find it in celebrities, alas.
Okay. I might come back to that because something happened this morning, which is interesting, but just personally here. A question comes in, are celebrities necessarily influencers? If so, is there an inherent risk with respect to actors where there is a danger of people assuming a degree of expertise associated with the role rather than the actor? Mark.
But this is a very interesting one. I think that, and this is not to be pejorative in any way, but with the celebrities that we have interviewed, one trend was very interesting for us, and that was that some people would come forward and say, I really like speaking out, expressing my views, and in part because I don't have a college education. And I find it really interesting that people will listen to me because I've always felt badly that I never had a college education. So I think that they will speak out, but sometimes a college education doesn't necessarily mean you're not intelligent. That's what I meant by being careful about this. But I think source credibility is extremely important when it comes to things like policy decisions. So again, when you see people side-skirting the government to meet foreign leaders and meeting drug lords and things like that, that's when I start to get a little bit nervous about what exactly they're doing. Because if I was to meet El Chapo, nobody would care. Okay, I probably wouldn't come back anyhow. But if Sean Penn goes to meet El Chapo, it's a big deal, right? So I think source credibility is extremely important.
Yeah. Lorraine, did you want to say anything to that?
I absolutely agree with Mark on that one. And I think that audiences, again, I go back to my earlier comment that audiences are surprisingly sharp about making judgments and connections about the link between the celebrity's realm of experience and the expertise involved in the subject that they're talking about. So, for example, I would point to Gwyneth Paltrow's site Goop, and some of the actually quite harmful medical advice contained on that site. And a great measure of the audience quite properly has recognized that in fact, this is not coming from a space of expertise. But unfortunately, it can also create harm.
Yeah. There's another question, and this is from Carl Marstons. It asks, how is this conversation different for people who remember Jane Fonda's entire career versus those who follow Andrew Tate on TikTok? What difficulties do the panelists perceive in examining younger generations as generational outsiders? Gemma? You want to have a go at this?
I can give it a go. Yeah, I mean, in the UK, Andrew Tate has been flagged as being a particular issue, especially for younger generations. So I know, for example, in some schools, they are now teaching children, you know, about the dangers of social media, the dangers of following particular people on social media. And I think this is where media literacy is going to be really, really important in the future. I think it's going to be important for us to be able to educate the younger generation to know about what they're seeing on social media, to question what they're seeing, the views that they're listening to. But I also question the role that regulation could have in this as well. For example, you know, should TikTok, Twitter, for example, should social media companies perhaps try to do a bit more in restricting these views, or will that impact freedom of expression too much, for example? And I think that it's a problematic area, and I think it's been recognised. For example, UNESCO had an Internet for Trust conference in March, where they sort of discussed regulation of these platforms, how tricky it was, how difficult it is to do in different countries. So I think perhaps media literacy could be the way to sort of, you know, hopefully stop these views from spreading by educating the younger generation who will be growing up with this age of social media.
Great. Anybody else on that one? Shall I go to the next one? Sorry, did you want to come in, Lenny? No?
If I could just add one further comment about a recent study that was done by the Gallup and Knight Foundations, trying to understand the sources of information and who do people trust for information. And the most trusted source is a host of a program, of a television program. And this can be anybody. It could be a news program, could be Tucker Carlson, could be Morning Joe, could be anybody, but the host. And then there's a pecking order of credibility. And then it includes comedians. And then down at the bottom are scientists and so-called experts. And so it's a little worrisome. And the people who are best at detecting information are the elder ones. You know, in the US, and also in the UK, the baby boomers. And the younger generations are the most credulous. And so that's where the effort needs to be, as Gemma points out.
Landon, a comedian, became the president of the Ukraine, didn't he? You know?
Yeah. Well, he was playing a comedian.
He was playing a comedian. Okay. Charlene Nabulane writes, Hill Harper's case is what I call skewed journalism. The fact that you have to delve deeper into the articles to learn that Hill Harper is more than an actor in The Good Doctor is rather problematic. He has a JD from Harvard as well as a master's in public administration from Kennedy School of Government. He is also an accomplished author and a community advocate who played a key role in shedding light to the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. So do you think that the media plays a role in the demise of accurate dissemination of information? How can journalists do better?
Wow.
I can see you're all racing to answer this question. So I'm going to come on, Lenny.
I completely agree. I saw the articles, and the articles tilt towards the celebrity angle as opposed to the credibility angle that Hill Harper certainly has as a Harvard grad and a public administration grad. And the media caters to this. And why do they do it? Because the marketers want it. As last, it fills me with some despair.
Mike, may I interject something here?
Yes, please do, Sandy.
I think this is a very, very interesting point. And I do believe that some well-intentioned mainstream journalists and people who know better contribute to this. I think that's part of the explanation. I mean, Donald Trump can drop a glove on the sidewalk and it'll get written about. And people know better. They're tired of Donald Trump or tired of certain other people themselves, but they feel competitive pressure to join in, to get on the bandwagon. And thankfully, at least in the US, journalism is virtually unregulated. And we don't have to worry that someone's going to move in with their own rules to prevent this, but there should be a lot more self-policing. I mean, it seems to me inexcusable that only the actor credentials of this person would have been cited in that case.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing going on at the moment in the UK. That's a unknown presenter on the BBC has been accused by two people of inappropriate behaviour. There's what seems to be happening now is it's the unknown panelist, because the BBC won't say who the panelist is. The panelist, who the presenter is. The presenter won't come on and say who he is. And so every time you're looking at it at the moment, people are talking about an unknown presenter. And it's going on day after day after day. Who is this unknown presenter? It's getting a celebrity status over complaints about the involvement. You see what I mean? It's kind of reversing around the whole notion of celebrity. Gemma, I don't know if you've picked up on this, but would you like to, from an expert's point of view, comment on it?
Yeah, I mean, I have heard the story. It's impossible to be in the UK without hearing the story at this moment in time. You know, it's making BBC News constantly. I think it's The Sun that initially ran with it.
Correct.
But I think what's also damaging in this particular case is the speculation on social media. So, you know, with people being named, you know, being speculated about, is it this presenter? Is it this presenter? And I think that's where we have to be really, really careful. And I think this is where media literacy is really important, because this speculation could lead to, you know, potential defamation, for example. You know, if you're naming someone, it turns out to be completely false, you know, that is defamatory against them. And I think that's really, really dangerous to do. But yeah, no, I agree completely with you that this has turned this unnamed person into a celebrity, you know, perhaps giving them, you know, more status than they had before. And we don't even know who they are. And I don't know if it's ever going to be revealed. I don't know what the conclusion will be. But I do think, you know, there is a line where people need to be aware that on social media, you can't speculate about who this person could be for potential legal reasons, which is really important.
Yeah, yeah. Lorraine, you were nodding about that issue.
I was just thinking about the questions that it raises. Michael, as you said, it seems to fly in the face of the concept of celebrity itself. So one question I sometimes put to people in the classroom is, can we have celebrity without individualism, without the intertwined workings of individualism and capitalism? Is it possible to think of celebrity outside of individualism?
Mark, how do you take that one?
Well,
I don't know if it's actually just capitalism, because in China, for instance, there's an enormous celebrity culture that we often don't talk about in the West. I spent 20 years in China teaching on and off, and I was amazed at how celebrity culture has risen. And in fact, one of the most popular things that happens in China are celebrity dating shows. And there's so many of these dating shows, it's unbelievable. You know, it wasn't that long ago that China really had banned any form of reality television, but now it's, you know, it's prolific. So the other thing I actually wanted to turn to a little bit is something that Gemma was talking about as well, and that has to do with she wasn't talking about this directly, but the rise of the haters on social media. So as a society, we often used to love to put people on a pedestal. if you remember Britney Spears, at the time she was at the top of her game until her mental illness really brought her down, and everybody piled on and tore her to pieces. And then amazingly, she, rose from the ashes again to then become, another icon, if you will. I think society, we as a whole, secretly love to tear people down. And then we love even more a redemption story. So I think that this negative news that you're talking about is part of this strange psyche of people who want to see bad news about other people. Maybe it makes them feel good. We're not sure. Maybe it's just a way of thinking and a lifestyle. But the amount of good news for celebrities pales in comparison to the amount of bad news, it seems to me. Now, I haven't done an empirical study on this, but you don't see celebrities often being applauded as opposed to seeing them being taken down for one reason or another.
That's interesting. Lanny.
Yes, I was just going to note that this reminds me of the so-called redemption narrative. And one of the sort of thought experiments I've done is, well, what if there were no celebrities? What would change? And one thing that changes is the bestseller list, because we lose about half of them, because half of them are celebrity memoirs written by a celebrity or their ghostwriter, and they all advocate a certain theme. And the theme is basically, I had a terrible youth. It was terrible. I made awful mistakes, but guess what? I redeemed myself. I pulled myself together. And it sort of goes from Schadenfreude to a triumph. It's a tragedy and triumph. And that narrative is repeated over and over again in the celebrity story. And that also goes way back to the Greek gods.
Absolutely. Well, there's a question here from Carol who says, would it be fair to say that the persistence of celebrity represents the deep human longing for stories? Lorraine?
I love that. I love that. I think that's so true. And just as we have, the persistence of the story of redemption, so too we have the persistence of the story of disappointed aspirations, of, all the whole panoply of narratives that humans have devised. So I've really liked, I think maybe the questioner may have, is it Carol? May have started a new thread of celebrity studies, narrative celebrity studies. I say brand it right now.
Of course, Lorraine, if you look in literature, the kind of literature that people used to like, not necessarily the celebrity stuff that Lanny's talking about, depended on the vice figure. The vice figure was always, the evil guy is always the thing, the baddie is always the thing that's attractive, isn't it? And so is this kind of part of this bringing down as well? Bring them down because they're bad. And if they come back up again, terrific.
I hate to be this person, but I think I want to put in a good word for the haters. Of course, accepting those who exhibit hate speech, that is a whole other category that we need to take right off the table. But in terms of, I think the haters may be somewhat related to my category of audiences that's very clever about just sniffing out some of the inconsistencies and the skeezy narratives that sometimes the celebrity world gives us.
Yeah. Any other comments on that, on story? No?
Well,
let's go to
Lorraine. I think
it's
interesting because the British tennis player Emma Raducanu. If you look at the posts that she makes a lot of posts on Facebook and Instagram and others. The amount and number of haters is just astronomical. They're saying ridiculous things about her. She's a young woman who has done something great, but they don't realize that, in my opinion, she's baiting all of them, because what she's doing is portraying herself leading the most fabulous life, the life of a celebrity. You know, she struggled with her tennis because of injuries. But I would say the ratio of haters to lovers is probably like, 10 to 1 at this point. But it seems to be feeding her in some unusual way. And I don't think the haters have seen through this one, Lorraine. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that they're just being baited, and it's creating more of a dialogue for her.
I love that point. I think you're absolutely right. And I would also, another example comes to mind, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who also gets just such a raft of hate thrown on her, especially online, and a famous retort, "Don't hate me because you ain't me."
Okay, I'll give you one last question. It comes from Josh Anderson. What role does class have in this dialogue, both regarding the relationship between celebrities and their followers, as well as political activism by the famous, particularly given that celebrities tend to be much wealthier than their admirers? Class and wealth. Gemma? You shouldn't have shaken your head the wrong way.
Yeah, I did think that as I was doing it. I don't know. I think class and wealth, I think it's an interesting one. And I'm not entirely, 100% certain on this, but I think in a sense, it's wanting to look into the life of someone, who's more opulent than us, for example. I'm just thinking that, about all the TV shows that they used to have, for example, MTV Cribs, for example, where celebrities would then take you around their house. You could see, how many cars they had, how many swimming pools they had, and things like that, where we were sort of, really invested in what was actually going on behind the scenes, the level of wealth that they had. Now you can see sort of sometimes when Vogue do their questions on online, for example, and they interview celebrities while they're walking through their houses. So we get a glimpse of, where they live, that sort of wealth that they have. So I think perhaps maybe it's just this fascination with, these people who have more than we have. I think there's just a fascination with wealth in general. Perhaps it's that level of disbelief that you can't believe what they have and you don't. I'm not entirely sure on that one, but I think, it's something that's been going for quite a long time in relation to sort of the wealth of celebrities.
Yeah. Any other comments? I just make one little comment myself. I'm actually sitting in a building which was once owned by a saint, and the saint created an order, a religious order. This morning we had 29 members of that religious order arrive. They told us they were going to come. What they wanted to do was go around. They wanted to see the place, and they wanted to say a prayer in the place where they actually wrote the rule of their order. There's something about, I think, still something about the way saints were, or maybe for some are now, and maybe towards this whole thing of celebrity, despite, I take what you said earlier, Lorraine. I'm not going to say where this is because I don't want a whole load of people coming because I'm on holiday. And I showed them around today. So there we are. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to the people who sent in really excellent questions. I'll hand you back to Sandy, and then I'll come back to close the event. Sandy.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think we may have had more questions today than we've had in many months, showing, I think, that this is a subject that intrigues and perplexes people. And I agree with you. We've had wonderful insights. Mark, Lorraine, Gemma, and Landon have all spoken to this very interestingly. I would note that we actually, as we set out, we planned these, start planning them a few months in advance. And we had the hope of having a celebrity on the panel today, having somebody who, and as far as I can tell, what prevented it from happening is that we were not willing to pay them.
correct.
being on the program,
Yeah.
which does not encourage us to think the best things about celebrities. They were
Yeah.
not willing to share their insights unless we were willing to pay them, which we have not done once in our 33 programs we've done. We're hardly about to start it now. But this has been a fascinating discussion, one that I suspect will get quite a lot of attention online after it's been put up there also. So thanks to everyone, and to my faithful colleague, Mike Scott. We have a wonderful time doing this work together and have been doing it for quite some time now and intend to continue. Thanks to Georgetown University, where I hang my hat these days and have a splendid experience with the true inquiry into many, many ideas and values that that university represents. And thanks to you all, and I hope everyone has a good day, and that we'll see you again, and as members of an audience, or others will join us to have equally fruitful and enlightening discussions. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, well, thank you. Maybe Sandy, we should have charged them to come on. You know, that's missed something there.
We'd have to guarantee that we were going to donate it to a good cause beyond our own programs.
Well, yeah, okay. We can find a charity or other. Thank you, Lorraine, Gemma, Mark, and Landon. It was a great discussion, and thanks, Sandy, for chairing the panel. The next free speech project at the Crossroads International Dialogues event, in association with the Future of Humanities Project, will be on Wednesday, the 16th of August, and we'll be discussing Afghanistan and what's going on in relation to free speech, democracy in Afghanistan. It's part of a series we've been doing on various countries. So please remember that Wednesday, the 16th of August, 11 a.m. Eastern time, and then whatever it is in the country that you happen to be. For today, my thanks to colleagues at Georgetown, particularly President Jack DeJoya and President of Global Affairs Tom Banchoff, Blackfriars to John O'Connor, the Regent, and to Richard Finn, the Director of the Las Casas Institute, and to Campion Hall, to Nick Austin, the Master of Campion Hall. My thanks to John McCabe in Georgetown, who administers this and is our main administrator for this from Georgetown, but also to Laura Lees, my UK publicist, and to Maggie Scott, who helps with the administration on this side of the Atlantic. Thank you all for attending today, for your support for the various series, and I hope you have as beautiful weather as we've got here in Provence for the rest of the summer. I'm Professor Mike Scott. I'm Fellow and Senior Dean at Blackfriars Hall, Oxford. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Scott Prof. Celebrity. Getting them on Twitter. Yes. Okay. Until next time, take care and keep safe. Goodbye. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.